talk a little bit about how you got started treating people who were victims of narcissistic abuse.
Mhm. So early on in my private practice, I started seeing women coming in, and I was just working with women at that point, who were describing this combination of a very difficult childhood with a very difficult parent and how it had impacted them as an adult. And to me, it seemed really clear that the parental traits really fit closely to narcissistic personality disorder. And I often heard from these people that they had never heard that before from their previous therapy. And so I started working with them and at the same time doing my own training on understanding of narcissistic abuse and growing up in a narcissistic household or having had a narcissistic partner. I got training through Dr. Carol McBride, who is a psychologist and international best-selling author. She has, I think, 3 or 4 books on narcissism or being the victim of a narcissist. So I got training from her, and then that started getting me more clients. And so this has turned into quite a specialty. And now that I'm also licensed in most states in the country, it has become a significant part of my practice where I'm seeing people from around the country, including sometimes I've several times worked with siblings who live in different states who I'm able to see, and they're trying to heal their relationship of having grown up in a narcissistic household. That was how I got into this specialty of working with the adult children and former partners of narcissists.
The majority of the abuse victims, are they recovering from having parents that raised them? Or is it a combination of they had the parents and then they were drawn to a narcissist as part of their, in a relationship?
Well, it's interesting because sometimes that does happen, where somebody is raised in a narcissistic household and they learn to be this appeaser, and the pattern of narcissism just feels, I guess, normal to them. And they have often ended up with a narcissistic partner. That has happened. And then on the other side of it, there are people who had really healthy childhoods where there wasn't narcissism, but they somehow ended up in a relationship with a narcissist. And I liken that to putting a frog in cold water. You know, that analogy where if you put a frog in boiling water, it'll jump right out and save itself. But if you put a frog in a pot of cold water and you slowly turn up the heat, it will die because it doesn't notice the temperature getting hotter and hotter. And that is often the case with people who didn't have a pre-existing tendency toward attracting a narcissist, but ended up with one nonetheless because it was such a gradual exposure.
What do you think draws people separate from they are used to it from their parents growing up with a parent that was a narcissist? But what are some of the other things that draw people to narcissists who may not have had a narcissist parent?
Well, I have to say that a narcissist can be incredibly charming. I actually once ended up in a relationship that with somebody I realized was a narcissist, and they are incredibly charming. They can be genuinely loving. They can be very good at reeling a person in, you know, because sometimes it is kind of more premeditated. Sometimes where they are almost like grooming somebody into this kind of relationship through what I call the hearts and flowers stage, where they are just wonderful and adoring. Interestingly, oftentimes they will propose and get married very quickly because this person just gets swept off their feet and swept into this romantic ideal, and this person is so wonderful. And then suddenly things start to change. I don't think the narcissist is always that calculating. I think sometimes the narcissistic traits, and again, remember that narcissism is a spectrum. And so there are some people who are hardcore, full-on narcissistic personality disorder. And then there are people who have traits of it to varying degrees. And sometimes I've seen that those traits only show up when they are challenged, when they're feeling threatened, when they're feeling ashamed, and they convert that into this narcissistic behavior.
So there's a difference between the behavior and a personality disorder. How much, if you're in a relationship with someone who's exhibiting these behaviors and or the personality disorder, how much of a chance is a normal relationship between people along that spectrum, with people along that spectrum?
Yeah, well, I would say where somebody falls along that spectrum certainly plays into it. Somebody who is a dyed-in-the-wool narcissist very rarely will go to therapy because it's everybody else's fault. They have nothing to to fix in their mind. I honestly don't know how somebody can coexist in a meaningful relationship with somebody who's significantly narcissistic.
Mm.
The emphasis on the word healthy. I think there are people who learn to adapt and make themselves small and conform around the narcissist to keep the peace, which is often part of the thing that becomes so pathological and so destructive. I have seen people who are on the, I guess, lighter end of the spectrum where their narcissistic behaviors are really coming from shame and fear. And if that person is willing to look at that without judgment, but with curiosity and with compassion for why they're doing this, and if their partner is similarly willing to meet them that way and not be shaming and accusatory themselves, it can create this space where that person can step back from and realize where this behavior is coming from and learn to do something different, learn to heal it, learn to show up differently.
What are some of the signs of narcissistic abuse and or a narcissist that people maybe don't know about or can be more aware of in the future?
Well, the signs of a narcissist, I mean, there's a wide variety. It can present in different ways. I would say the most consistent traits that I see my clients having experienced from a narcissistic, let's say, parent, is that the parent needs them to be the kind of child that they want them to be, whether it is what they do, in sports or in school, how they show up, how they dress, how they speak. And if they aren't conforming to that, there is often punishment in various forms. For some of them who have become the scapegoat, there is nothing they can do that's
Mm.
good enough. That there will always be something to be picked on, to be criticized for, to be rejected for. There is also the type of narcissist that is, we've heard of gaslighting,
Mm.
where the person will deny anything they've said. Let's say the mother says they can, go to the school dance. And then the girl's getting ready for the dance, and the mother says, "Where are you going? I didn't give you permission."
Mm.
And so it screws with their sense of what is real. And where that is happening all the time, and where a person loses touch with their own reality. I've seen a sort of narcissism that is sort of like victim narcissism, meaning the parent is always sick and they're always not feeling well and they need the child to take care of them or cook dinner, or, it's almost like the roles are reversed in what we call the parentified child, where the parentified child needs to perform the role either for the parent or for their siblings of being the caretaker in the relationship and putting their own needs aside. I have seen a pattern where parents play siblings off against each other. It's sort of like this triangulation where they talk about one sibling to the other, where they criticize, and then they almost like foment arguments and disagreements and hurt and anger and distance between the siblings,
Mm.
which is so painful for both of them. There's often a golden child where there's the perfect child that gets everything and is in some ways has the sort of ideal parent, and then there's the scapegoat and who gets nothing, and but witnessing this golden child of this ideal parent they wish they had, but is never directed towards them.
Mm.
There's something that's really an important piece of this that often happens as well, where it isn't actually with the narcissistic parent, but with their spouse. In a healthy dynamic, in a healthy marriage, parents are closely aligned and they are both together taking care of their children. But In a narcissistic family dynamic, it's sort of like if you think of concentric circles where the narcissist is at the center and the spouse is around them, focused inwards toward pleasing the partner, toward placating them, toward keeping them calm, toward keeping them happy. And they are often doing it at the expense of the children who are just floating out here somewhere, either unattended to or ignored, or in some ways kind of being fed to the lions by the other parent, or
Yeah.
told to just do what your mother says, or keep quiet, don't upset your father, or supporting or turning a blind eye to, quite frankly, abusive or neglectful behavior because they don't want to be, they don't want to have to deal with their partner's reaction.